Most men don't break down loudly. They go quiet first. They don't scream, and no one notices, not even them. That's the dangerous part, because collapse doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it waits. It asks one question over and over again. How long are you going to pretend you're fine? Pause. There is a moment in every man's life when everything freezes. Not on the outside, on the inside. You wake up one day and realize you're tired in a way sleep can't fix. Distracted in a way scrolling makes worse. Comfortable in a way that feels like slow suffocation. You still move, you still talk, you still laugh at the right moments. But something essential has gone numb. And you tell yourself it's normal. Everyone feels this way. You'll fix it later. When things slow down, when you're ready, when you have more time. Later becomes months. Months become years. And one day you realize you've been waiting for help without ever calling for it. Silence. Here's the truth most men avoid. The mind doesn't collapse from pain. It collapses from avoidance. From too much dopamine, too much noise, too much comfort, too many exits from discomfort. Your brain was never designed for endless stimulation without meaning. It was built for effort, for tension, for purpose. So when you remove struggle, the system doesn't relax. It panics. That panic shows up as numbness, as procrastination, as confusion, as constant distraction. You think you're lazy, you're not. You think you're broken, you're not. You're overloaded and under-aimed. Tell me something. When was the last time you sat in silence without reaching for your phone? When was the last time you did something hard without telling anyone? When was the last time you chose discomfort on purpose? Or have you been waiting for motivation to arrive first? It never does. Motivation doesn't come before movement. It follows it. But no one tells you that when you're young. They tell you to feel ready, to feel inspired, to feel confident. Confidence is not a feeling. It's a side effect. And right now, you're waiting for the side effect without taking the medicine. Pause. Think about your day. How many times did you escape instead of engage? How many times did you know what to do and chose something easier? Another video. Another excuse. Another tomorrow. You didn't fail dramatically. You failed quietly. That's why it hurts more. Because you can't point to one mistake. Just 1,000 tiny ones you keep forgiving. And deep down, you know it. That awareness is heavy. So you distract yourself again. This is the moment most men miss. Not the collapse, the warning, the feeling that says, if you don't change something now, something will change you later. Life is patient, but it is not gentle. It will wait until you're comfortable enough to stop fighting. Then it will test you. And when it does, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your preparation. That's the 3-minute window this story is really about. Not minutes on a clock, minutes in the mind, the moment you notice the numbness, the moment you feel the drift, the moment you realize you're losing sharpness. That is when everything is still possible. After that, momentum takes over. Here's the twist most men never hear. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You don't need a miracle. You need one honest interruption. One moment where you stop negotiating with weakness. One moment where you don't argue with reality. One moment where you act before the noise talks you out of it. Not later. Now. Because the brain changes through action, not insight. Discipline is not punishment. It's communication. It tells your nervous system, we're safe because we're capable. And capability restores hope faster than comfort ever will. You don't need to feel powerful. You need to do one powerful thing. Stand up when you want to sit. Move when you want to scroll. Choose silence when you crave noise. Small acts, clean signals. This is how men come back online. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. No applause, no announcement, just alignment. And something strange happens when you do this. The fog lifts, the body follows, the mind sharpens. Not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. That clarity is dangerous in the best way. Because once you see how much of your suffering was optional, you can't unsee it, and you stop waiting for help to arrive. You become the help. Not for everyone, for yourself. That's where real strength lives. Not in intensity, in consistency, not in noise, in restraint, not in pretending you're fine, in choosing to respond before you collapse. So if you're listening to this and something feels exposed, good. That means you're early, not late. You're still in the window. And what you do next doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be honest. Turn something off, stand up, breathe, then do the one thing you've been avoiding. No one is coming to save you. And that's not a threat, it's an invitation. Because the moment you stop waiting, life starts responding. Stay here for a moment. Don't rush past this part, because this is usually where the mind tries to escape again. It wants a shortcut, a takeaway. Something neat and simple it can nod at and forget. But real change never enters through convenience. It enters through presence. Right now, as you're listening, there's a quiet choice being offered. Not a loud one, not heroic, just honest. Will you keep living on autopilot, or will you interrupt the pattern? Most men don't realize how much of their life is running on default. They wake up already tired. They move without intention. They consume without hunger. They sleep without peace. And they think the problem is discipline. It's not. The problem is attention. Your attention has been rented out, sold cheaply, scattered across 1,000 tiny hits of stimulation. Every time you check, every time you scroll, every time you avoid the empty space, you're teaching your brain one lesson. Stillness is dangerous. Silence is uncomfortable. Discomfort must be escaped. So when life finally asks you to sit with yourself, you panic. You call it boredom. You call it anxiety. You call it confusion. But it's none of those things. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from constant pleasure, from endless distraction, from being soothed instead of strengthened. And no one warned you this would happen. They told you freedom was comfort. They told you happiness was ease. They told you you deserved to feel good all the time. That lie is expensive, because a man who cannot tolerate discomfort cannot tolerate growth. And growth doesn't knock politely. It arrives disguised as pressure. Pressure to decide. Pressure to focus. Pressure to become someone more precise than who you were yesterday. That pressure is not the enemy. Avoiding it is. Pause. Think back. When did you last feel proud of yourself? Not entertained, not relieved, proud. Not because someone praised you, but because you did something hard when no one was watching. Most men can't remember, not because it never happened, but because it's been buried under years of easy rewards. The brain remembers effort differently. It respects it. Effort tells your nervous system, I can handle reality. And once the brain believes that, fear loses its grip. That's why comfort never builds confidence. It only delays fear. This is where the story changes, not with motivation, with responsibility. Responsibility is not weight, it's orientation. It gives suffering a direction. Without it, pain feels pointless. With it, pain feels meaningful. And meaning is what young men are starving for. Not success, not money, not status, meaning. A reason to wake up with tension in the chest instead of dread. A reason to endure silence instead of escaping it. A reason to say no to the easy thing. Here's the realization that flips everything. Your life doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be aimed. Most of your anxiety isn't chemical. It's directional. You're moving, but not toward anything that demands your best. So your system stays restless, unsettled, unsatisfied, because deep down, you know you're capable of more than consumption. The moment you give yourself a target that requires discipline, the noise starts to quiet. Not immediately, but reliably. Discipline is not about control. It's about relief. Relief from endless choice. Relief from constant negotiation. Relief from the exhausting question, what do I feel like doing right now? Strong men remove that question from their life. They decide once, then they execute daily. That's not rigidity, that's freedom. And here's where the metaphor deepens. Those 3 minutes aren't about urgency alone. They're about clarity under pressure. When everything inside you wants to freeze, can you still act? When your mind says just this once, can you still choose what you said mattered? That's where identity is built. Not in grand moments, in micro decisions made while uncomfortable. This is why silence matters. Silence exposes excuses. Silence removes anesthesia. Silence forces you to hear what you've been avoiding. At first, it's loud. Thoughts race. Regret surfaces. Fear talks. Stay anyway. Because underneath the noise is something solid. Your instincts, your values, your direction. Men who never sit in silence never meet themselves. They live as reflections of their environment. But you don't need more input. You need more integration. You already know what you should be doing. That's not the problem. The problem is you've been waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a myth. You move first. The feeling follows. Always. The brain doesn't reward thinking. It rewards doing. That's dopamine's real purpose, not pleasure, progress. When dopamine is tied to effort, you feel alive. When it's tied to ease, you feel empty. This is the cost of modern distraction. It trains you to seek reward without resistance, and resistance is where meaning lives. So if you feel lost right now, good. That means you've outgrown something. If you feel uncomfortable, good. That means you're close to a decision. If you feel exposed by these words, good. That means you're still reachable. The danger isn't pain, it's numbness. Pain can shape you, numbness erodes you, and the choice between the two is made daily, quietly. No one sees it, but you feel it. This is the calm before commitment, not excitement, not hype. Resolve. Resolve doesn't shout, it settles. It says, I will do what I said I would do, even when it's boring, especially when it's boring. That's how men reclaim momentum. One kept promise, then another. The world responds to consistency, not intensity. And eventually, something shifts. You don't feel fixed, you feel aligned. Your actions match your values. Your time reflects your priorities. Your nervous system calms because it trusts you again. That trust is everything. Without it, you're anxious. With it, you're steady. This is where hope becomes grounded, not fantasy, not optimism. Hope rooted in evidence. I did what I said yesterday. I can do it again today. That's real confidence. So if this moment feels like a line in the sand, it is. Not because something bad is about to happen, but because something good won't happen unless you choose it. You don't need to change your whole life tonight. You need to change how you respond tonight. Less noise, more intention, less escape, more effort. Not forever, just today. That's how strength is built, quietly, repeatedly, without witnesses. And one day, you look back and realize you didn't wait for help to arrive. You became the man who acts before things fall apart. There's a strange calm that shows up when a man finally stops lying to himself. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. It's the calm that comes after you admit, I've been avoiding something important. Most people think that admission will crush them. It doesn't. What crushes you is carrying the lie every day. The lie that you don't know. The lie that you can't. The lie that it's too late or too complicated or too risky. The truth is simpler. You knew. You could. You just didn't want to feel uncomfortable yet. So you delayed. Delay feels harmless in the moment, almost polite, almost responsible. But delay has a cost. It slowly teaches your nervous system that your word doesn't matter, that intentions are optional, that discomfort is a threat instead of a signal. And once your body stops trusting you, everything feels harder. Focus becomes fragile. Confidence disappears. Energy leaks out of small decisions. You start asking questions like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stay consistent? Why do I feel stuck? Nothing is wrong with you. You've just been training the wrong reflex. You've been training escape. Every time something felt heavy, you reached for relief. Every time boredom showed up, you anesthetized it. Every time pressure asked you to choose, you postponed. Those choices stack, not as guilt, as identity. And identity is powerful. A man who sees himself as someone who delays will delay even when it costs him. A man who sees himself as someone who responds will respond even when it hurts. That shift doesn't come from thinking differently. It comes from acting differently once. Just once. That's the moment everything pivots. Not because life changes immediately, but because you do. You stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, what does this moment require? That question is grounding. It pulls you out of your head and into responsibility. Responsibility isn't pressure, it's clarity. Clarity quiets anxiety, because anxiety thrives on ambiguity, on open loops, on unresolved decisions. When you decide, the nervous system exhales, even if the decision is hard. Especially if it's hard. This is why disciplined men often look calm. Not because life is easy for them, but because they're not negotiating with it constantly. They accept reality early. They act sooner. They suffer less in the long run. Most suffering comes from resistance, not effort. Resistance to the truth, resistance to discomfort, resistance to growth. Once you drop resistance, effort feels clean. It burns, but it doesn't rot. And there's a dignity in that burn, a quiet pride. You feel it when you wake up knowing you didn't betray yourself yesterday. That feeling is rare now, but it's still available. Here's what no one tells young men. Your brain is not broken. It's overstimulated and underchallenged. Your attention has been hijacked, not destroyed, which means it can be reclaimed. But reclamation doesn't feel good at first. It feels empty, Because when you remove constant stimulation, you're left with yourself. And yourself has questions. Questions about purpose, questions about direction, questions about what you've been avoiding. That's why most people never slow down. They're not afraid of silence. They're afraid of what silence will reveal. But revelation is not condemnation. It's information. Information you can use. The moment you stop drowning your inner voice, it starts giving you instructions, not gentle ones, honest ones. It tells you where you're weak, where you're wasting time, where you're settling. That voice is not your enemy. It's the last part of you that still wants more. Ignore it long enough, and it gets quieter. Listen to it once, and it gets stronger. That's the crossroads, and it's always quieter than you expect. No signs, no countdown, just a subtle feeling that says, if you don't move now, you'll harden. Hard men aren't strong. They're closed. Strong men are open to discomfort. They let it teach them. This is where hope becomes real. Not as a feeling, but as a pattern. You don't hope your life gets better. You build evidence that it can. Evidence looks like this. You wake up and do the thing you said you would do before your mind argues. You choose the boring discipline over the exciting distraction. You sit in silence long enough to hear your own resistance, and you don't obey it. That's it. Not heroic, not impressive, just reliable. Over time, reliability compounds. Your self-respect grows, your anxiety shrinks, your sense of direction sharpens. You start trusting yourself again. That trust is the foundation of everything. Without it, success feels hollow. With it, even struggle feels meaningful. This is the part where most motivational talk gets loud. I won't. Because real change happens quietly. It happens when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when there's no immediate reward. It happens when you choose to act before comfort talks you out of it. That's the real before help arrives moment. Not waiting for rescue, not waiting for inspiration. Choosing to respond while you still can. While the pattern is still flexible. While the habit hasn't hardened into fate. You are not behind. You are early. Early enough to interrupt the drift. Early enough to reclaim momentum. Early enough to become dangerous in the right way. Dangerous to excuses. Dangerous to numbness. Dangerous to the version of you that keeps postponing life. You don't need to announce this shift. You don't need to explain it. Just begin. Quietly, seriously, let your actions speak before your mouth ever does. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you'll notice something different. You're steadier, calmer, less reactive. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped freezing when pressure showed up. You acted. That's the difference. There comes a point when a man realizes something subtle but unsettling. He hasn't been failing because he's weak. He's been failing because he's been comfortable. Comfort doesn't feel dangerous. That's why it's effective. It doesn't attack you. It sedates you. It lowers the volume on urgency. It smooths the sharp edges of dissatisfaction. It convinces you that tomorrow is guaranteed. And that's how years disappear, not in chaos, in softness. You don't lose your life in one dramatic collapse. You leak it away through small, painless choices. Another delay, another excuse. Another night spent numbing instead of building. And because nothing explodes, you tell yourself nothing is wrong, but something is always wrong when potential goes unused. You feel it in the background. A low-grade dissatisfaction, a tension that never fully leaves, a sense that you're living below your capacity. That feeling is not depression. It's not anxiety. It's friction. Friction between who you are and who you know you could be. Most men try to silence that friction. They drown it in noise. They smother it with pleasure. They rationalize it away. Strong men listen, because friction is information. It tells you where growth is being avoided. It shows you exactly where your edge is, and the edge is always uncomfortable. That's why the mind resists it. The mind wants safety. The body wants ease. The ego wants reassurance, but the soul wants alignment. Alignment doesn't come from feeling good. It comes from acting in truth. Truth is often inconvenient. It says things like, you're capable of more than this. You're wasting time. You already know the next step. Those messages aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to wake you up. And waking up is rarely pleasant at first. It feels like loss. Loss of illusions. Loss of excuses. Loss of the fantasy that things will change without effort. But what you gain is heavier. Agency. Agency is the quiet power of knowing my life responds to what I do. That belief changes everything. Without it, you feel trapped. With it, you feel responsible. Responsibility is not a burden. It's a position of strength. It means your actions matter. Your choices count. Your discipline compounds. Once you accept that, you stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for approval. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You move when it's time, not when it's comfortable. This is where many men get confused. They think discipline means forcing yourself, white-knuckling, suffering endlessly. That's not discipline, that's resistance. True discipline is agreement with reality, agreement with your limitations, agreement with the cost of becoming more. It's saying, this is hard and I'm willing. Willingness is powerful. It removes inner conflict. When you stop arguing with the work becomes lighter. Not easy, but clean. Clean effort doesn't drain you, it sharpens you, and once you experience that, you stop chasing shortcuts. Shortcuts insult your intelligence. They promise relief without growth, reward without effort, results without responsibility. Your nervous system knows that's a lie. That's why shortcuts never satisfy. Only earned progress does. Earned progress rebuilds self-respect. Self-respect is the foundation of masculine calm, not confidence, not dominance, calm. The calm that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself under pressure. That calm is magnetic, not because it's loud, but because it's rare. Most men are reactive, pulled by impulses, pushed by moods. A man who can pause, choose, and act deliberately stands out, even to himself. That's the quiet transformation no one talks about. You don't feel like a new person. You feel like a returned one, like you've come back to something you lost, your edge, your clarity, your standards. Standards are underrated. They're not about perfection. They're about boundaries. Boundaries around your time, your energy, your attention. What you tolerate shapes who you become. If you tolerate distraction, you become scattered. If you tolerate excuses, you become unreliable. If you tolerate discomfort, you become resilient. Resilience doesn't show up in crisis. It's built in boredom, in repetition, in showing up when it doesn't feel rewarding. That's why the early phase feels empty. You've removed stimulation, but you haven't yet built meaning. That gap is dangerous if you don't understand it. Most men quit there. They mistake the absence of pleasure for the absence of progress. But that emptiness is a clearing, a space where something solid can be built. If you don't fill it intentionally, distraction will rush back in. That's why direction matters. You don't need 10 goals. You need one worthy aim, something difficult enough to demand discipline, something meaningful enough to justify sacrifice. Without an aim, discipline feels cruel. With an aim, it feels necessary. The aim doesn't need to be grand, it needs to be real. Real enough to matter when you're tired, real enough to guide your choices. Once you have that, your days organize themselves. You wake up with friction, but also with purpose. Purpose doesn't eliminate pain. It gives pain a reason, and pain with a reason is survivable. This is where the story turns quiet again. No climax, no speech, just a man who no longer freezes when pressure arrives. He doesn't panic, he doesn't run, he responds. That's the difference between drift and direction compounds, slowly, relentlessly, until one day you realize you didn't wait for life to force you. You moved while you still had the choice. That's strength. There's a moment that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not the beginning, it's not the breakthrough, it's the quiet middle. The part where nothing feels exciting yet, but something feels different. You're no longer asleep, but you're not fully awake either. You've stopped running, but you haven't arrived. This is where most men turn back. Because the old life still calls, comfort still whispers, distraction still offers relief, and the new life hasn't started rewarding you yet. This is the test no one prepares you for. Not intensity, not pain, patience, patience with yourself, patience with the process, patience with the silence between efforts and results. Your nervous system is relearning how to exist without constant stimulation. Your mind is relearning how to focus without instant reward. Your identity is being rewritten through repetition. That takes time, and time feels unbearable when you've trained yourself to expect everything immediately. This is where dopamine tells the truth. When dopamine is tied to novelty, you get addicted to starting. When dopamine is tied to effort, you get addicted to finishing. Finishing is rare. That's why it feels powerful. Most men start, few stay. Staying is an act of faith, not blind faith, earned faith, faith built from small proofs. I showed up yesterday. I didn't quit today. I kept my word again. Those proofs stack quietly. They don't inflate your ego. They stabilize your spine. You start standing differently, speaking less, choosing more carefully. You don't need to convince anyone anymore because you're not trying to escape who you are. You're becoming someone you can live with. This is where distraction loses its grip, not because it disappears, but because it no longer controls you. You see it for what it is: noise, anesthesia, delay, and you don't hate it. You just don't need it the same way. Need is weakness. Choice is strength. You begin choosing effort over ease, silence over stimulation, depth over speed, and something unexpected happens. You start feeling again, not the shallow highs, the deeper sensations, pride, groundedness, a quiet satisfaction at the end of the day. Not every day, but enough to know you're on the right path. This is where purpose stops being a concept and becomes a behavior. Purpose is not what you say you care about, it's what you're willing to suffer for. Every man suffers. The question is whether it's random or chosen. Chosen suffering strengthens you. Random suffering drains you. Once you understand that, you stop asking, how do I avoid pain? And start asking, which pain builds me? That question changes your life. It simplifies decisions. It sharpens priorities. It removes illusions. You stop chasing comfort. You start building capacity. Capacity is real security, not money, not status, not approval. Capacity, the ability to endure, to focus, to respond under pressure. That's what keeps a man steady when things shake. And things will shake. Life doesn't reward preparation immediately. It tests it unexpectedly. One day pressure arrives, a problem, a responsibility, a moment that demands clarity, and you notice something. You don't freeze. Your breath stays steady. Your mind stays present. Your body responds. Not perfectly, but competently. That's when you realize why all those quiet days mattered, why the boredom mattered, why the discipline mattered, why the silence mattered. They were training you for a moment that couldn't be rehearsed. That's the real meaning behind this story. Not stopping collapse, but preventing paralysis. Not waiting for rescue, but becoming reliable under pressure. That's the man people trust. That's the man life respects. And the respect doesn't come from others first. It comes from you. You trust yourself now, and trust is calm. Calm doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It acts when necessary and rests without guilt. This is where hope becomes quiet and strong, not the kind that says everything will be okay. The kind that says, whatever comes, I can respond. That's unshakable. So if you're listening to this and wondering whether it's too late, it isn't. As long as you can still choose differently, you're early. As long as you can still interrupt the pattern, you're in the window. And the window doesn't close loudly. It closes slowly. When men keep postponing the moment to act, don't dramatize this. Don't romanticize it. Just decide. Decide to live deliberately. Decide to train your attention. Decide to tolerate discomfort long enough to build something real. You don't need permission. You don't need certainty. You need honesty. And the honesty is simple. No one is coming to save you, and you don't need them to. Because the moment you stopped waiting, the moment you chose to respond, the moment you acted before everything froze, you became the kind of man who doesn't collapse quietly. He moves, and that is enough.